Embroidery is one of the crafts with the richest history, I think, out of all of them. It's got thousands of years of history from prehistory, 30,000 BC to modern day. We are still using it. And it was used to decorate all sorts of items: upholstery, linens, clothing, and tapestries that we would hang on the wall, kind of like paintings. Now, it would take hundreds of hours at the bare minimum to go through all the different types of embroidery that have been present all across the world. So I just wanted to focus on one particular type to kind of get me started in this journey of historical embroidery work, and that is crewelwork embroidery. Crewelwork embroidery gained popularity during the 17th century in England and is a type of surface embroidery that uses wool thread, usually on a tightly woven linen fabric. Now, modern day crewelwork is kind of a catch-all term, and it's used on a lot of different fabrics and types, but generally it's still used with woolen thread. Now, the type of crewelwork I'm taking inspiration from is Jacobean crewelwork, which involved a lot of florals and flowing patterns that really created these beautiful tapestries on clothing garments within the upper classes. Now, before I get into the nitty-gritty of my specific project and how I went about creating something inspired by Jacobean crewelwork, I had the wonderful opportunity to sit down with Deborah Wilding, who's a teacher at the Royal School of Needlework in London and an expert on crewelwork embroidery of the 18th century.
All right, so take two. Why don't we start? So introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Okay, so my name is Deborah Wilding. So I'm an hand embroidery specialist and a teacher for the Royal School of Needlework. I did the future tutor training course with the RSN in 2012 to 2015, and I've been working with them regularly since then. But I also work freelance, so I work for various organisations that are really interested in hand embroidery and traditional arts in a bigger way.
Yeah, awesome. So kind of trying to get into the background of crafting, like when did you first start crafting, whether it was embroidery or something else? Like when did that really kind of start in your life?
Well, I would say embroidery has always been my passion right from the beginning, actually. So I would say I was always a child that loved to kind of cut things up and make things and in an imaginative way kind of use my hands to do things. But I think I've just been obsessed by hand embroidery in particular since I was about 6 or 7. When I think I've got this vague memory of being bought a kit of a rose one Christmas, which was a needlepoint kind of canvas wool thing, which I had finished in like 24 hours. And it was only little, but it was, done. And my gran taking me to a shop and buying me something bigger and more elaborate soon afterwards, which I equally finished just as fast. And it was always my passion then, really. And it's not something that's come from another member of the family because no one else did it. So for me, it's always been my kind of go-to medium, really. I just love textiles, color and the tactile nature of textiles, I think has always been my thing. As much as I do love to paint and draw, and that definitely informs what I do and is part of my practice of what I do. I still gravitate back to embroidery in particular as my preferred medium.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I was never that talented at drawing or painting, but my mom did cross stitch and stuff when I was a kid and make Christmas ornaments, so I did that as well growing up.
Yeah,
It's nice to have something like physical, like kind of
absolutely. Yeah,
at the end of it.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's, I don't know, there's something different about the tactile nature of something that's like fiber and
Mhm.
thread and fabric. I don't know, it's just got a life of its own. And I'm sure if you spoke to painters and things like that, they would have a similar feeling about their work. But I think, I don't know, there's just something a bit more of an engagement process with me about textiles.
No, I definitely agree with that. So when did you like when in your life did you really like you were passionate about it when you're young? When did you really start to think of it as like, okay, this is like a career option?
Yeah, so I probably went through school still with an artistic passion. But again, because I didn't come from a family that really valued artistic practice as a career path, It wasn't really something that I was encouraged to carry on with. Probably more so actively discouraged, to be fair. So I ended up doing a degree in cartography, actually. So I ended up doing a cartography degree, and then I worked in that field of with local authorities and local government and drawing maps for 10 years or more. So finished university, did a job straight from university, worked for more than 10 years doing that. And then it wasn't until I'd known about the Royal School of Needlework from about the year 2000. And I'd done a class, a day class, or a couple of day classes with them, and was like, "This is me. This is my place. These are my people." Like, why didn't I not know about this earlier on? And I wanted to train with them then, but it just life just didn't allow it. I'd just bought a house. It just wasn't practical. So I just had to shelve it at that point. So when my kids were born, so Joseph was born in 2003, Livy was born in 2006. In 2006 there was an amazing craft shop that opened in my hometown of Clevedon. And it's still here and thriving today. It's called the Spinning Wheel, and they do all types of textile related hobby kind of shop. It's brilliant. It's just an amazing place. So they do lots of quilting, and they also sell spinning wheels and weaving equipment and knitting and crochet and embroidery and all of those things. So I was working for them part time. And then I found out that the Royal School of Needlework had started doing their certificate and diploma program in Bristol. So I attended those courses and flew through it at a rate of knots because I was just absolutely obsessed and wanted to do that. And then in 2006, they'd had to fold their teaching program. So it kind of come to an end. And then when I was doing my course, they actually approached me and asked me if I'd like to train as a teacher on their newly kind of reinstated teacher program. So I started that in 2012 and finished that in 2015. And I've been a regular teacher for them ever since.
Wow, that's good that they kind of just came to you with that, like,
Yeah,
didn't
I
have to
think
chase it.
no, I think sometimes it just things are meant to happen for a
Yeah.
reason, aren't they? And things just fall in your lap. Obviously it takes a lot of work. I'm not belittling that, and it is a real slog getting a really
Yeah.
good career choice in the creative arts. It's not easy.
Yeah, definitely.
But sometimes it is opportunities that just you're just very lucky and things come up in the right time and the right timing for you, and it just works.
Yeah, I find that similar because obviously as a history student, getting work in the heritage sector versus the arts, like it's very similar in a lot of ways. You just got to know people, and
Yeah.
it's very hard to kind of get that entry point in it. So that's
Yeah, it is. It's really difficult. It's really difficult because so many people want to do it, but there's few jobs around in it.
yeah.
And it I don't know, it just worked for me, and it just worked at that moment. It was just the perfect mixture.
Yeah. So how much freelance work would you say you do versus like the teaching? Like, is it more or less?
So I'd say it's probably about 50. No, well, I'd say it's about 50-50 teaching for the RSN and teaching for other people. But I think out of that, I probably do more teaching than I do creative work of my own. I'd say that's probably 80-20. So I do get asked to do commission stuff, but I do end up fitting it in around the teaching side. It's funny, I was having a conversation with somebody earlier this week about this, that there's a lot this particular job that I'm in, especially when you're working with organisations like the Royal School of Needlework and others that I work for, there's an awful lot of lead up time with what they want to produce. So, for instance, not so much the certificate diploma, because for that it's a program that's constantly running, and I turn up, I teach it, and I walk away that day. But for day classes and for special events, for instance, sometimes that's a 2 year program. So I am asked 2 years before I'm going to teach it to tell them what I'm going to teach, give them photos of the finished things. So I often have to do things well in advance, work out all the pricing and everything for that thing, and then have a long time in advance waiting for the bookings to come in so that that event goes ahead. So quite often you're working a long time in advance of something due to happen. So it's quite a tricky career to get established in to begin with because you don't have that backlog of things that are trickling in. And when you're trying to live off this as a job, it's quite hard because, if you're waiting 2 years to be paid for something, unless you've got
Yeah.
other money coming in for something else, it's a really difficult balance.
Yeah, I can imagine. Bit stressful, I assume, especially in early days trying to establish yourself in that.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, it is. But it's about reputation. So much in the creative arts is reputation as well, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
about if people come to you and have a really good experience, they enjoy the way you teach, they enjoy your technical, know-how in the subject you teach, and they come back. So you get a lot of repeat bookers because of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. I'm hoping to take a class myself at the RSN, hopefully within the next year, whenever I've saved up enough
Oh
to do
yeah,
that,
yeah,
because
you
some of them
should
just are
definitely.
look absolutely fascinating
Yeah, yeah,
in there.
they really are fascinating, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's good to know, it's not the easiest thing to get a career in, but it sounds like it's very rewarding and
Mm.
worth it for you
Yeah,
because of your
I love
passion
it. I
for it.
wouldn't, as much as it's frustrating at times, it's not a career choice I would walk away from. I love it. I enjoy spending time with my peers as well. It can be quite lonely sometimes, but I think in a similar way to other artistic practices, that you spend a lot of time in your own company working on something.
Yeah.
So actually, I quite like that and the balance of teaching because that feels more sociable and a bit more kind of like you're part of a group.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do quite like the balance that I have.
Yeah, and I found that crafting communities are mostly very welcoming and very excited to have people, you know, come
Absolutely. Yeah,
together and that kind of
yeah.
thing. So I
You
imagine,
also find that they're very much a sharing space as well, though, in things that are much bigger than just the action of doing something with your hands. Because I find I'm not a therapist in any way, shape, or form, but I do find that people will come to sessions when their hands are busy, their brain is just allowed to offload. And I think maybe that's why I loved it so much as a teenager myself, because it was something that I could busy myself with and maybe quiet my mind a bit in a lot of ways, because
yeah,
you get very
definitely.
absorbed in the action of the doing.
hmm Yeah, and I think you feel so accomplished, especially if you're doing like, with some of one of those big needlepoint kind of projects that you like, I did that at the end of it,
Yeah,
which I think, especially for young people, I think there's a lot of people getting back into it these days, like, because it's just, with all the other uncertainties of the world, it's very nice to have that kind of a feeling of accomplishment that I
it
think
is. Yeah, it
we've
is. I
lost
think,
in a lot of other ways when it comes to
yeah.
job security and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, it is something that you can kind of just keep working away at. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, moving on to the like actual like embroidery things, like so do you have a favorite like historical era of embroidery or like type of embroidery that you like to do or
I'm
teach?
rather partial to the sort of 16th, 17th century stuff. So the kind of high embroidery stuff of the Tudor Stuart period kind of thing. Um, I do quite a lot of work for a company called the Crewelwork Company, which you might have seen on social media and things. And they do a lot of work where they often purchase or get permissions from collections to use a very specific piece of historical textile. And we do recreation classes based on that. So we recreate something. So for instance, next year I'm working on a Victorian book for them, which is beautiful. It's all silk shading and gold work, and it's from 1902. It's stitched on silk, and we're going to do that as a 10-month course online where people are going to recreate the embroidery exactly as the original, and then it's going to be made into a book. And I think courses like that, and I've done quite a number of those. So I've worked with organizations and museums like the Fashion Museum in Bath, for instance, recreating things from their textile collection. I think they're a very powerful way of students learning, and I love those type of classes myself because it really does feel like nothing has changed in the hundreds of years. It could be a 400-year item, and nothing technically has changed in the methodology and the materials and the tools you use to create that thing. It's still just the needle and the thread and the fabric that you're using. And it does really give you that goosebump thing of feeling that you're walking in the shoes of somebody from hundreds of years ago. And I just love that. So I suppose that's the kind of working on the historic era stuff I really do enjoy because it does feel like you're bringing it back and it's a window into the history. It's really lovely to do.
Yeah, I'm looking into for this project to doing some crewel work, which
Mm,
I've done, regular surface embroidery with like, just DMC on cotton, type of standard stuff.
yeah,
But I've recently got some crewel work thread in from online, so I'm very excited
yeah.
to try and look and see what kind of sources I can find to pick a historically inspired pattern. Do you have any recommendations of like sources that people can look at for these type of things? Books, video resources for somebody who's
Yeah,
wanting to get
well,
into this like historical.
things like Pinterest and things are great. There are some amazing old books which have got some motifs because quite often, especially with Jacobean crewelwork, for instance, that's a perfect example. There was an awful lot of copying of those motifs from the original sort of 16th, 15th, 16th, 17th century herbologies and the beastologies and things like that of the time. So those original printed texts where suddenly you got those motifs. But I think if you're learning and it's just for your own work, if you look on the V&A website, you'll be able to see some of the pieces and you'll be able to just copy the motifs that are on there and recreate them. And the same surface embroidery stitches, those very basic surface embroidery stitches, are the same ones that are used in crewel embroidery. It's just that you're doing them on a linen fabric with a wool stitch over the top.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's a really good entry level way of doing some surface embroidery work, and it's a lovely kind of introduction to a lot of other types of embroidery.
Yeah, I found that there was a lot when I was doing some research about like what type of embroidery to do. I found there's a lot of crossover. Like you said, like a lot of the stitches are the same across every
Absolutely.
thing,
Yeah.
for the silk versus wool. Like, so how stickler is the, historical embroidery community about this is Jacobean crewel work and this is like, 17th,
Well,
17th
you're
century
completely
silk.
right. You will get stitches which are used across the board throughout. So you'll get things like a buttonhole stitch, which is used on a Jacobean crewelwork piece from 1500 and something, and you'll get a buttonhole stitch used on a stumpwork casket from the 1600s or the 1700s. So the stitches themselves have a much longer sort of historical longevity and they've been reused and repurposed, and you just get a very different effect based on the materials you use and the scale of which you're doing them. So with Jacobean crewelwork, and that's one of the reasons why we teach it on with the Royal School of Needlework as the first module that we teach for surface embroidery, is because it's actually quite quick. Because you're using a two-ply wool and a reasonably large needle in comparison to other techniques that you might do, and it's on a linen fabric, it's quite rapid and you get quite a lot of effect for not so much time. Whereas if you repeated exactly the same techniques at a smaller scale on a piece of silk with a single strand of silk with a much smaller needle, you might get a much more kind of tiny and polished effect to it, but it'll take you a lot longer. So it's a really good way of teaching people with Jacobean crewelwork how where to start, really. It's a really nice one to get going with.
Good. It's good to know that that's a good starting point. So for my videos, my goal is to kind of like show people what they can do now without having too much context and how they can bring
Yeah,
heritage crafts into their daily life. So I'm planning on doing some inspired Jacobean
yeah.
work on a jacket that I have, just
Lovely. And
to
one of the nice things about crewelwork as well is the fact that it very much had a practical use. So a lot of it still exists because people were using it as decorations for the home. So even now, I find that a lot of my students, they will do a piece of embroidery, which is absolutely beautiful, but quite often they get to the point where they're like, oh, it's another thing to hang on the wall. But actually, to have something that they could make into a cushion or something that they could make into a bed covering or something like that actually gives it another dimension. So quite often people really like that about crewel work as well because it gives them something they can use in a practical way.
Yeah, definitely. It's yeah, and it's nice to hang something on the wall, but it's also nice to have something that you can be a part of your life and be used
Yeah,
as it was
yeah,
back in the day.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And things were repurposed, that's historically, we're very lucky that quite a number of the pieces of embroidery we have still exist because historically it was a case that things would get um, chopped up and repurposed. People saw the value and the expense and the expertise behind commissioning pieces of hand embroidery, but they didn't want them to just kind of, go out of fashion and not be used. So quite often old pieces, especially costume pieces, were cut up and repurposed into other things. They were made into household items or bed coverings or even, things like that, or even just like adornments to other things because people didn't want them to be wasted. They knew the monetary value that sat behind them.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's an important part of heritage crafting as well, is being conscious of the materials you're using and how you're using them,
Yeah.
and things like that. And so I enjoy like, crewel work is it's wool, it's a natural fiber, natural source, and it should last, as long
Yeah.
as you're not throwing it in a, washer dryer, that it should
Yeah.
last for
Yeah.
many years to
Absolutely.
come.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do you have a favorite like historical piece of embroidery that like you were drawn to or that you loved recreating?
Um, well, I'm rather fond of this book that I'm going to be working on at the moment because it's just beautiful. I'm quite into the arts and crafts era. Um, I'm also I keep coming back round to there is a beautiful piece of embroidery by a lady called May Morris, who was the daughter of William Morris. And if you look it up, it's called The Maidens. And it's a square piece of embroidery, but it's based on a circle, and it has a text element. I can't remember off the top of my head now what the text is, but you'll have to have a look at it. And then in the center, it's a set of roses, and then there are other flowers that go around it, and then in the four corners, there are four birds flying inwards. And I love it because I'm really into May Morris anyway, and that arts and crafts era. I thought she was a absolute amazing woman of her time, and she's exceptional embroiderer. And I love that design aesthetic. But I don't know if you knew this about me, but I'm also doing an MPhil at the moment with the King's Foundation of Traditional Arts.
I think I
Um,
saw something about that, yeah.
yeah, so I'm doing an MPhil and I'm looking at the use of geometry and drafting skills that underpin embroidery art. And one of the things that I particularly love about this is that there's a very, very specific embroidery, like geometry drafting skill that sits behind this embroidery, which is that the circle that's in the middle, if you offset it north, south, east, and west and create it so that you've got the four circles together, it exactly matches the shape of the four birds that sit in the corners. So these were skills that they were utilizing, but they're skills that possibly we've stopped using and have forgotten about.
Yeah,
So they're
not
skills
noticing
that
how
I'm
much
trying
went
to
into it.
reintroduce.
Does your cartography skills come into kind of like analyzing that? You could still use your
Yeah.
degree. So
Yeah,
that, yeah.
maybe it is. Maybe it's that hand drafting passion. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely. That's very cool. Well, thank you so much. Trying to think if I have any other questions. This has been awesome. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me. I'll keep a lookout for that Victorian because I'm very much a fan of Victorian and that arts and crafts movement myself. Like Victorian and Edwardian was always my favorite
Yeah,
part of
well, have
history.
a look on the Crewelwork Company website.
Yeah,
They
will do.
purchased at auction four embroidered books. The oldest one is from the 1600s. It's a book of Psalms, which is tiny. It's like this big, And that is a counted embroidery technique. And Kate Barlow is teaching that one at Askham Hall in the autumn as a face-to-face class. And then there were two other books. One was a book of days, and one was, I'm not sure what the other one has got inside it, but there's two others. Zena Casban and Natalie Dupuy are both teaching, the other one's online, and there's some amazing pictures of the books and the progress of the reconstructions of them. And then you'll see my Victorian one that's on there as well. But they're just a beautiful collection, and they've been very the courses have sold really well because again, people are very passionate about that kind of doing things exactly as it was done hundreds of years ago, and enjoying the process of that and the non-mechanization, as you said, the walking away from leaving your phone to one side and using your hands and just being really engaged in the materials and the quality of the piece that you're doing. It's really it's a lovely thing, and students get a lot out of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think so too. I'm hoping to share these kind of things with the rest of my history students for the public history because we're quite a small group. I think there's 13 of us maybe in total
Oh,
doing
okay.
the degree. So we've all kind of, supporting each other in our projects, and
Where are
doing.
you based, Abigail?
So I'm in Egham right now because I got a Royal Holloway, but I'm about
Hmm.
to move to Basingstoke in about 2 weeks, so
Oh,
I'll be over
okay.
there for now. But yeah, within distance of central London. So I'm hoping to get some more into the heritage crafting community in London and think really just explore what people have to offer in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, did you were you aware of the King's Foundation School of Traditional Arts?
I've not, no, I've not heard of
I would
it.
definitely look that up online as well.
Yeah,
So they are in Shoreditch, so it's not cl it's really close to you can get from Paddington, you can get off the on the Elizabeth line to Liverpool Street, and it's 10-minute walk from there.
yeah,
But they are a school that specializes in the teaching of traditional heritage craft. And they do everything from stained glass to pottery to icon painting to Persian miniatures, Indian miniature painting. Yeah, it's just a phenomenal school and it's an amazing place. And quite often they will do lectures on just things like the sublime or beauty or all these kind of things. And it's well worth you looking into what they're doing and their day class program because it's exceptional.
yeah, definitely. I will definitely be looking that up.
Yeah.
All right.
They also do quite regular exhibitions at the Garrison's Chapel in
Mm,
Chelsea, which is also definitely worth having a look at because it's you'll be blown away by what's now being produced in a modern era, which is just so beautiful.
yeah. I did have one question. So obviously you said you have your local like craft shop that you go like so what I was wondering for people who, looking to buy online and stuff like do you have a favorite like vendor for your like embroidery supplies or anything like that you kind of like go to or do you is it kind of piecemeal across like
Yeah,
certain people do certain
it's a
things?
bit of a mixture, to be honest. So it very much depends what the project I'm working on. I use quite a lot of DMC threads and Anchor, but Anchor's been bought by DMC now, so it's all one and the same. I try if possible to buy things from the UK only because there is issues now with the post-Brexit. There's all this import-export
Yeah.
malarkey, which is a real pain in the neck. But there's a few different people that I buy things from. So there's a beautiful French company, they're based in Paris called Soir, which do gorgeous silk embroidery threads. There's also a really good company in the southeast of England called De Vere Yarns, which do silks and really fine worsted embroidery wools, which are really nice to work with as well. And they do cottons as well. So there are for gold work, I tend to buy all my stuff from a company. Well, there's two golden wire silver drawers left in the country. There's one called Benton and Johnson, which are based in the Midlands, and there is another one called Golden Threads, which are also in the southeast of England. So I use those. I try and support those English companies if I
Yeah,
can,
definitely.
because historically they are, they have the longevity of hundreds of years, so it's worth trying to keep them going. Um, but recently, and because of my MPhil, I've also been doing a lot of natural dyeing myself. So I've been doing a lot of kind of natural dyeing process, and I've been trying to experiment with stitching with my own dyed yarns. So I've been
Very cool.
buying blanks of lace weight yarns and then putting them through natural dye processes to create my own color palette. So, and that is a really special thing because, again, like you touched on earlier on, I think if you've had involvement with the materials right from the beginning of even creating the colours of them, I think it's a very different, you have a very different engagement in the whole
Yeah,
process. I feel very differently stitching something where I've created the threads myself as opposed to just buying something off the shelf. Um,
definitely.
but yeah, it's a real mixture and very much depends on the technique I'm doing and what I'm doing and who I'm doing it for.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, mini update. So I was having really hard time deciding what design exactly to go with for my jacket. So I've decided to just start with one kind of central motif and then decide kind of what I want to go from there, because I was like, I really just need to, I think, just get it going, get it started. So I've decided to go with kind of like a heart motif in the middle with some filling stitches, and I'm gonna use a bunch of stitches that I found in my 18th century embroidery book, techniques book, and the Royal School of Needlework, the Stitch Bank website. I'm kind of taking inspiration off this pattern I found in my 18th century embroidery techniques book. I just saw the heart, and it looks like I could try some different filling stitches and do a couple things. So I've went ahead and started doing some chain stitches to kind of do the edge. It's not the most even thing in the world, but a lot of the things I was looking at, a lot of examples, especially ones that weren't like the really, really intricate, like, things from court and things like that. They do have that feel of handmade, and they're not completely even, and the lines aren't completely symmetrical on every side. It's obviously done by hand, and perhaps not always by professionals, just people decorating their own clothes and things. So I'm fine with a little bit of not perfectness within the design. But yeah, so I've started on that, and so hopefully I can finish that soon, and then I can kind of decide what kind of I definitely want to do some florals, because that was really a big thing in the Crewelwork design world, was nature and flowers. So I definitely want to incorporate florals into it. So I'm thinking about maybe having some things branching off, but with just starting with the central motif, it kind of gives me the flexibility of just going kind of wherever I want after the fact. So update on the Crewelwork embroidery. I've done some flowers around here and some leaves. I'm going to fill in the leaves with yellow, like a couple patterns I found in my book. And I decided I'm gonna do some filling with chain stitches and on this blue flower, and then I might do something in the middle here. There are a couple flower examples that I found that kind of have like two side petals and do something in the middle. So I might do that. But it might be too small in the middle here once I do this side filling. So we'll see. It's a little bit of a wonky shape. And I wish I had a darker blue, but working with what I've got here. We got these two, and then once I finish this and do the filling in, I might just go ahead and work and do some other flowers on the other side to kind of make it even, and then go from there. And also I want to do something in the middle of the hearts, so yeah, kind of finish this up and then those two more sections, and then I might be done. We'll see. So I'm just finishing up some of the last flowers on my Crewelwork jacket, and I did a little strawberry. It's a little wonky, but very, very cute. And just having some thoughts on historical embroidery. Now, obviously, what I'm doing is not entirely, really at all accurate in the way that things would have been made. A lot of um, embroidery was done before the piece was sewn. The fabric was traced with the pattern pieces, and then it was stretched on frames and then done that way. And I would love to try and do some of that someday on a piece of sewing that I do. But doing this, I kind of find I have to live with imperfection a little bit more. We look at so many of these old garments that are these beautiful silks, brocades, in these like amazingly even lines, because they were made for aristocracy and royalty. But that wasn't what most people were using and had embroidery on. The things that I'm taking inspiration I'm taking for this project comes from a lot of undergarments and things like pockets, and aprons and things like that. And those were things that regular folk were using, and they were just stitching them for a little bit of decoration, just for fun, because a lot of things most people wouldn't even see. So I think we have this idea of this like really high level of perfection that exists in historical embroidery that actually didn't. I'm looking at the actual extant examples of these pockets and aprons and things like that, and you can see the imperfections. You can see the, kind of awkwardly pulled stitches and knots in the work and unevenness. And so I think when it comes to doing, historical embroidery and things, we kind of, especially beginners, need to let go of this idea of perfection that I've had, and I'm sure other people have. With a lot of times when it comes to craft, we want things to be perfect on the first try, but you know, I tried on the jacket the other day with just the half that I had done, and it was just, I loved it. It was so good, and you got to realize that most people aren't looking at those tiny little details of like, oh, this stitch is slightly off, or this, stitch doesn't meet the outline perfectly. And once you let go of that, I think it's a lot more enjoyable. And I'm just a regular folk. I'm not, wearing these to balls or coronations or anything. So it is entirely realistic and accurate to have things that are imperfect, and um, not quite right. So I just think that this project has helped me kind of accept the limitations and imperfections that I've been finding in my craft. So I've come outside just to show my somewhat finished jacket. All right, so I've come into the kitchen just because the lighting's a little bit better in here to show off my mostly finished jacket. Let's see, flowers there, and the heart. Now, you'll notice I didn't put anything in the middle of the heart yet because I could not for the life of me decide what I want to put in there. Now, the great thing with embroidery in it, this kind of thing, is I can add it whenever, and I'm already thinking of adding things like some vines going down here, or maybe some Japanese sashiko embroidery style things on here as well. But I just really love it because I can add on to it, and I can look at different periods of embroidery and just add kind of different things on here to create this kind of catch-all historically inspired jacket, embroidery across the ages in one garment, which I think will be really cool. But yeah, so I'm really pleased with how it turned out. Like I was talking about earlier, I kind of had to embrace some of the imperfections, but I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I'm really excited to wear this out and like see if people ask about it, and like I make comments on that type of thing, and then I can start spouting my knowledge of historical embroidery. But I'm really excited to explore more with historical embroidery, and hopefully maybe take a class, maybe from Deborah Wilding, or at least at the Royal School of Needlework at some point, because they offer such amazing courses in doing historical embroidery, and I'm just really excited to hone in on the skills, because while I have embraced the imperfections of things, I want to get better and I want things to look neater and learn some more tips and tricks. But I would say doing this kind of embroidery is extremely accessible for a beginner. Like, I had done some cross stitch and some embroideries before, but you could do what I've done with like 2 stitches, like do flowers and stuff. Like, you don't need to know a lot. So I think like a couple of YouTube videos, a couple of looks on the Royal Stitch bank thing, you could absolutely do something like this on any of your garments, and that just brings that little piece of history that you can carry around with you day to day, which is kind of the point of this whole project that I'm doing, is to bring those historical practices and that historical artistry into the 21st century. And something like this that I can add to, and just adds a little bit of fun to an otherwise, fast fashion. This is from Gap, just, a garment that's not really telling a story or giving anything. It gives such a personality to it, and it's something so personal as well, which I just think is super cool.